with anyone. It's not unusual to see me cry. I wanna die.
I'll tell you, one of the most memorable scenes was Tom Jones performing in the club. And the whole crew, you know, there is no audience. The audience is us.
Right.
And the whole crew is in here watching him. They just love watching Tom Jones sing, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was one of the most memorable things that I can remember in all of my film time, and how the crew really picked up on Tom Jones doing that, you know, his song, you know, and then the Martians attacking, of course, and all that stuff.
Of course. It is. I mean, the title does give away. There's a little foreshadowing in the title, right? It's just so funny that the message is they come in peace. It's interesting because I was looking at this movie going, how did they put this together? I bet they get Jack Nicholson first, and they probably get him with the two roles. And then everyone else just wants to be in a Jack Nicholson movie. So you can get Danny DeVito and Glenn Close and all these people and Michael J. Fox. I'm just kind of curious. I don't know if I'm right on that. That's just what feels right.
I don't know that side of it, but I would imagine that's true.
Yeah.
You know, because you've got him, and then you've got, what's his name, that played 007 for a while. What's his name?
Pierce Brosnan.
You know, you got all. I'll tell you a story about that. Now, Rod Steiger's in it, right? And one of the ADs told me at one of the locations, you know, all these people have their trailers, and each of them has, you know, trailers that match each other. Now, I guess he doesn't have one of those trailers. So the AD told me he was walking past the trailers with the AD, and he said, well, whose trailer is that? And they would say, so-and-so. Whose is that? So-and-so. He looks at the AD and says, you know, I used to be big once.
How was Steiger? You know, because he's been considered a method guy. And here he is, he's playing a guy that's ready to nuke the planet. So how was Steiger during this production?
Well, a lot of his stuff was on stage, you know, where they're in the, you know, the war room and all that stuff. So the one scene that I really had with him was actually out in front of the Capitol when the Martians go into the Capitol. And the funny thing about that was, now this is pre, you know, 9/11. It's now that we're in this season.
Yeah.
And we literally had to bring tanks and howitzers up on the other side of the reflecting pond for this scene to work. And when you look at it, it looks like it could be, you know, a CG or whatever, but it wasn't. It was real. And the Capitol Police were like not wanting it to happen. Okay.
Yeah, I bet.
And so they called a meeting. Myself, Larry Franco, and a studio exec flew back from LA to meet at the Capitol with Capitol Police, Park Service, and the city of DC. And they first tried to get the DC commissioner to say, they said, well, these vehicles have got to travel on your streets. Are you going to let them do that? And she said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to aid this film. So they couldn't get her to break. So then it went to, and now in DC, you got to understand, the street is one domain, the sidewalk's another, and then you go into the park. Everything is a different domain. It's one of the toughest places to shoot because you've got to know who's who. So then they get to the sidewalk, and that's Capitol Police. Well, I don't know if we want our stuff being over there, da-da-da-da-da. So we went back, and then they still went back to the woman, and she said, I'm going to do whatever I can to aid this film. So now they get to the Park Service, and they says, well, we just don't have enough, and we just don't have enough security for this show. It's cherry blossom time, and that's where all our forces are. And so then I say, now I'm doing all the speaking for the studio, right? Larry's there, the studio head's there, but I'm doing the talking. I said, well, we have our own security force. And they said, oh, really? Well, who is, of course. I said, yeah, you know, we always have our own. Well, who is your security? Now, that is one scene. The other scenes we're shooting in the community of DC, which is a different DC than the DC now. So I've hired the Nation of Islam to be the security force. So I kind of go, well, it's the Nation of Islam. And the Capitol Police guy's neck gets about this big and this red, as red as your wall back there. And all of a sudden now the Park Service has got people for security. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the one thing was, don't point the howitzers or the tanks at the Capitol. You can have them there, but don't point them at the Capitol. So I'm gonna give this, we never told Tim that, right?
Oh, wow.
Larry and I never told Tim that. So Tim said, get him, point him at the Capitol, point him at the Capitol. So they point him at the Capitol, but nobody says anything from any of the jurisdictions. So after the scene was over, I saw Larry and I said, Larry, he got him pointed at the Capitol. I said, where were you? He said, I was in my car. He said, where were you? I said, I was in my car too.
Right. I get how you guys do.
But we got it. I mean, because none of that stuff was active. I mean, none of that, all that artillery was not active. It was, couldn't fire. So all the firing and all the sound effects were put in later. But, they just didn't want it pointed at the Capitol. You would probably never be able to get that done now, with this climate. But it was that DC was quite a experience.
So you really did have the Nation of Islam. You weren't just pulling that out of your hat for the
No,
negotiation.
That's true. I did in DC.
Who was the Warner Brothers exec with you? Do you remember who it was? I'm kind of curious.
It was Michael. He was in with Lisa Rollins. It was Michael. What was his last name? He was the second command, and they were like the policy for the studio. Like if you used military stuff, they would interact with the military for you. Mm-hmm. One of the things was we really wanted to put a prop spacecraft on the lawn out front of the Capitol, and they said you can't do it. And Newt Gingrich was just coming into office at that time, and I was actually dealing with Newt Gingrich's office to make it happen. And we were cutting close, but then they squashed it because no spacecraft. It wasn't a precedent set for it. Like you could shoot in the Capitol if it was a picture or a film dealing with something that actually happened in the Capitol. And it just so happened when I was scouting, some senator was trying to make a point. He brought this little spacecraft and put it on the steps. And I happened to be there. So at that meeting, I shot it and I presented that picture. I said, see here, a spacecraft has landed at the Capitol. They said, no. So we had to put that in CG. And then, like I say, all the firing of the artillery was CG as well, the sound effects.
Your road to redemption is paved with tombstones. No quarter, kill all masters. Go to noquarterkillallmasters.com. Rated R.